Bob Goff is a lawyer from California, and he tells a story of how he felt convicted to help offset and combat the atrocities that were happening in Uganda. As he tells the story, he said he heard of this terrible thing that was happening in Uganda regarding child sacrifices. He said that the witch doctors have a belief, a tribal belief, that some children have special powers and that some body parts from these children have magical powers. And so there's all sorts of mutilation going on and all sorts of child sacrifices that are taking place. And to make matters worse, there's no means in Uganda to prosecute the witch doctors who are partaking of these child sacrifices. And Goff, being a lawyer, said, I've got to do something about that. And so he goes to Uganda, and it's actually worse when he gets there than he had even heard about when he was here. And he goes straight for the worst convict that he can find. And it's a guy named Kavi. Kavi has already sacrificed over 800 children as a witch doctor in Uganda. And he said, we got to start there and make an example out of this guy. So he studies up on Ugandan law and becomes the prosecutor against Kavi, defending all of these defenseless children that have been sacrificed. And so they go to court, and he gets a conviction, the first conviction ever for somebody making a child sacrifice in Uganda. And Kavi gets a death sentence, a death penalty sentence for his atrocities that he's committed. Now, why would somebody like Goff feel compelled to go somewhere as far away as Uganda to do something like this? I think throughout this series, we've been expanding our definition of who our neighbor is. We've expanded that definition to include anybody, anywhere in the world that has a need. That is our neighbor. The person that has the need becomes our neighbor. Goff hears of these things taking place, these terrible sacrifices that are happening, and he realizes those children in Uganda are his neighbor. And so he goes and does what he can. It's hard to believe we're concluding our series on Strangers at My Door today. We've been studying this book for the past 4 weeks through neighborhood small groups and during worship. It's a book by Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove where Jonathan feels compelled to move into a troubled neighborhood in Durham, moves his family into this neighborhood. And the whole premise behind the book is that they're going to move into this neighborhood and they're not just going to live there, but whoever knocks at their door, they're going to answer it and try and help that person in need. Because for them, those people are literally their neighbors. They put a door plate on their door that has the verse that we talked about last week, where Jesus says, when you welcome the stranger, you've welcomed me. And they really believe that. So they open their door to anybody that knocks and they try and help whoever has needs. So they expanded their definition of who their neighbor is, just as Goff expanded his to include children in Uganda. And this matters to us as Christians because every soul has value. Every soul has worth. Because of Jesus, the light of the world that came into the world, every soul has value. Every soul has worth. I love the way the Christmas hymn, O Holy Night, says it. Till he appeared, and the soul felt its worth. Because Jesus appeared, our souls bear the image of Christ. Because Jesus appeared, we have the spark of the divine in each one of us. John's gospel is the one that tells us mostly about the incarnation of Jesus Christ. This whole idea that Jesus came as God to become one of us, fully human, fully divine. Emmanuel, Christ with us. Emmanuel, God with us. And Michael's going to read that for us today from John 1.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word was with God in the beginning. Everything came into being through the Word, and without the Word nothing came into being. What came into being through the Word was life, and the life was the light for all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness doesn't extinguish the light. A man named John was sent from God. He came as a witness to testify concerning the light, so that through him everyone would believe in the light. He himself wasn't the light, but his mission was to testify concerning the light. The true light that shines on all people was coming into the world.
Thanks, Michael. The true light that shines on all people All souls have worth because we all bear the spark of the divine that's in each one of us. I love Elisa's analogy with the mirrors because I believe it's true that part of us being bearers of this image of light, the spark of the divine that's in us, is that we reflect that light back to others. But I think I want to take a step back from that because I believe we have to go through a process first in order that we can reflect. We have to first understand what it means for our souls to be worthy. I think of a lot of us here today, you might not feel worthy. And that can happen for a whole host of reasons. People might have told you that you're not worthy. And I need you to know, God needs you to know today that every soul has worth. Your soul matters. You might not feel worthy today because of something that you've done. A past that is catching up with you, or a past that you can't shake. And you need to know today that God is telling you that you have the spark of the divine in you, that your soul has worth. For whatever reason, if you feel unworthy before God today, God needs you to know that you are worthy. You are worthy simply because God looked out over the span of humanity and sent Jesus Christ, God with us. We are worthy because God became one of us. The light is for all people. You bear the image of God. You bear the spark of the divine. And until we can get to a place where we acknowledge that we are worthy to bear the light of God, it makes it really hard to reflect that light back on others. Scripture tells us that we're to love others as we love ourselves. And so until we're unable to love ourselves, until we're able to see ourselves as God sees us, that indeed our soul does have worth, you are valuable as a child of God, we're unable to reflect that light. But then once we see ourselves as children of God, once we see ourselves as light bearers, once we understand that our soul has worth, then we're able to reflect that light back. And a good way to do that is to begin to see people, everybody else, as children of God. If we felt unworthy and now we realize that God created us in God's image and we are worthy, we should be able to see that spark. We should be able to see that light in other people, even the people who are unlovable. I love the way that Jonathan says this. It's towards the end of the book. And he said, if Jesus showed us what it looks like for this light to shine out of human flesh, the light coming into the world. This is Jesus. If Jesus shows us what it looks like for the light to shine out of human flesh, he also invites us to see that it's there beneath our skin. You bear the image of God. You do. That we kindle the flame when we embrace it, especially in those who have been forgotten and pushed aside. The light that is in each of us can shine out. It illuminates the person across from you so that you can see them often as if for the first time. With your eyes wide open, you don't only see the child of God across from you, you reflect their light back to them. It's a reflection like a mirror. By the light that shines out of each of us, we learn to see each other. I realize this is an incredibly hard concept to grasp because, let's be honest, there's people in your life that are really unlovable and they're really hard to love, and it's hard sometimes to see them as the children of God that they are. But as a step of moving towards this, we need to begin to understand and see the good qualities of these people. And I think that's a good step in that direction. What are their good qualities? Where have you seen evidences of light in their life? Where have you seen them bear the image of God? Look for the good qualities in others before you see their bad qualities. And I realize it's really, really difficult for some people because some people just are hard to love. But we have to get to the place where we can see everybody as children of God because they too bear the image of God. They too are the reason that God came to earth. Emmanuel, God with us, so that they too can spread the light to others. Now, there's also people in your life who you just know that are living a life that's really far from God. And I think we have a tremendous opportunity as Christians to be a witness, to be the light for them. You have dark places in your own life, and you need the presence of God. You need God's light to shine into those dark places. But you also know people who are living a life that's far from God. And it's our mission as a church, that we are a church for those who are disconnected from Christ, or a bridge of faith through Christ for those who are disconnected. And so it's our responsibility as Christians to find people who are living a life that's far from God and to shine the light, to be that mirror that reflects the light to them. Now, there are some really bad ways that we can do that, and I don't want you to be the kind of person that does that poorly. We want to do that well, but it must begin with you acknowledging other people that you meet with a relationship. It must begin with you seeing them as a child of God, not some sort of ministry project, not some sort of number or some mission that you personally have, but you see them as a child of God. You begin the relationship and you begin to see the spark of the divine in them. You begin to see them for who they are as children of God. And if it starts there, it won't be done poorly. It'll be done because you care deeply about them coming into the light. Goff finishes the story. He said, if every soul has worth, if every soul has value, then that means that the children that I'm defending, sure, they have eternal value. But what about Kavi? What about the person that I prosecuted? So Goff felt convicted to return to Uganda 60 days later after the trial. After he prosecuted and put a man on death row, he goes back to Uganda. He goes to Luzira, this maximum security prison where all the death row inmates are waiting. 3,000 death row inmates. Walks into the prison. Now, just so we're clear on the image that's taking place here, you've got a white lawyer from California traveling to Uganda, going to one of the most dangerous prisons in all of the world, where everybody there is waiting to be sentenced to death. He goes and he confronts the person that he just 60 days earlier sentenced to death. And he has a conversation with Kavi. And he says that Kavi looks at him and said, I have a darkness inside of me. I have a void inside of me. And Goff looks at him and says, let me tell you about the light of the world that came into the darkness, and the darkness is never going to extinguish it. And over a series of visits with Kavi, Kavi comes into the light to become a follower of Jesus, and then begins telling the story of Jesus to all 3,000 of the death row inmates that are there in the prison. Brothers and sisters, you bear the image of God. A weary world rejoices because the light of the world has come into the world. Your soul matters. Your soul has worth simply because you bear the image of God. Simply because you are light bearers taking that light into the dark places in our world. You have the spark of the divine in you. Take your spark and go light your world. Now today, what I want us to do as a way of concluding this series is we're going to have a time of reflection, of silent prayer. And as a way of guiding our prayer, we're going to put images up on screen of faces of people from all over the world. As a discipline, I hope we can begin to see other people as the light bearers for the kingdom that they actually are. So if you'll just meditate on these images, or just where you are, if you just need to pray to God, that God would take away your darkness, that God would fill that void, you certainly can do that. I also want to let you know that if you need to kneel here at the prayer rails, that's available to you. If you want somebody to pray with you, I'd love to spend a moment with you in prayer. Just let me know. But let's begin and enter into a time of dedicated prayer today as we remember the light of the world. God, we thank you that you love us enough to become one of us, to send your Son, the light of the world. And there's dark places in our lives, and we need your light. There's people living in darkness, and we need your light to go to be before them. So use us, and help for us now, in this time of prayer, that we might begin to see all of your children as light bearers who bear the spark of the divine.